The darkness under the bed was a kingdom of whispers, forgotten socks, and broken toys. It was also the home of a creature known only as Murk, who had lived there for what felt like an eternity. Murk was no ordinary monster. His long, crooked limbs folded in unnatural angles, his eyes glowed faintly in the dark, and his breath smelled of old wood and damp earth. He had frightened countless children over the years, feasting on their fear like sweet nectar. For centuries, Murk had been the terror of children's bedrooms, pulling covers from little bodies, whispering dreadful things into innocent ears, and scratching his long nails along the wooden frame to summon screams in the dead of night. Fear was his sustenance, and no child had ever dared confront him. That was until the new one arrived. The house at 47 Hollow Pine had been vacant for years, rumored to be haunted, avoided by all but the bravest of realtors. When the Carver family moved in, the neighbors watched from behind closed curtains. They had a boy, maybe 8 or 9, with large, hollow eyes and an unsettling way of standing perfectly still for long stretches, just staring. His name was Eli. Murk noticed Eli immediately. His presence was different from the others. There was no initial cry of fear when the monster stirred beneath his bed the first night. No pulling of the covers over his head. Instead, Eli simply whispered, "I see you," in a voice so low and gravelly that even Murk recoiled. Shaken, Murk withdrew deeper into the shadows. Monsters under beds weren't supposed to feel fear, but for the first time an icy sliver of something unfamiliar crept into Murk's black heart. He told himself it was a fluke, a moment of weakness. Tomorrow would be different. The next night, Murk prepared himself, sharpening his claws on the iron springs, humming an ancient lullaby meant to unravel the mind. He waited until the moon hung high and the house was silent. Then he struck. With a guttural growl, Murk emerged halfway from under the bed, his eyes burning brighter than before, his crooked grin splitting wide. But Eli was already sitting up, waiting. His eyes gleamed in the dark. He didn't scream. He didn't move. He simply smiled. That smile was wrong. It stretched too wide, almost as if it had been drawn on with a razor. Murk hesitated, his growl fading into an awkward grunt. Eli's small hands twitched, and a low rhythmic chant bubbled from his lips, ancient and foul, a sound that no human throat should have been able to produce. Murk scrambled back under the bed, heart hammering against his ribs. The words clawed at his mind, making him dizzy. He had to flee, to find a different house, a different child. But something held him there, a chain, invisible but strong, binding him to this cursed bed. Days passed, and Murk no longer ventured out. He shrank into the farthest, darkest corner of his space. From above, he could hear Eli moving in strange patterns, dragging something heavy across the floor, tapping out sequences against the bed frame, humming lullabies that Murk himself once used to torment children. The monster began to weaken. He hadn't fed on fear in days. His limbs thinned, his glow dimmed, and his voice, once a deep rumble, was reduced to a pitiful whisper. Yet each night, Eli would lean over the edge of the bed, peering into the darkness with those hollow, endless eyes. "Come out," Eli would coax, voice dripping with unnatural sweetness. "It's your turn now," Murk whimpered. He didn't understand what was happening. This was not how it was supposed to be. Children feared monsters, not the other way around. He clawed at the floorboards, trying to tunnel away, but the wood would not give. One night, Murk awoke to find a small crack in the darkness above him. A thin, pale hand was reaching through the bed frame, fingers impossibly long and sharp. Murk screamed, a high, keening sound that vibrated through the walls of the old house. The hand gripped him by the ankle and pulled. Murk thrashed and kicked, but Eli's grip was iron. Slowly, Excruciatingly, the monster was dragged upward, through the bed, through the mattress, through the very fabric of reality. Murk found himself in a place not meant for him. A room turned inside out. The walls pulsed like breathing skin, and the floor oozed black liquid. Eli stood in the center, but he was not a boy anymore. He had grown taller, his limbs stretching grotesquely, his face a writhing mass of shifting features, eyes blinking in random places, mouths smiling and frowning simultaneously. He was a being of nightmare, a god of terror that Murk could barely comprehend. "You hid under my bed," Eli said, though his voice now echoed from everywhere at once. "Now you hide inside my mind." Murk tried to scream, but no sound came. Eli stepped forward, his form shimmering, and with one swift motion he peeled Murk open, layer by layer, like unraveling cloth. Murk's memories spilled out, old victories, old terrors, and Eli drank them all greedily, feeding on them as Murk once fed on fear. Murk felt himself unravel, losing bits of his self with each passing second. Desperation clawed at him. He remembered old magics, older than fear, older than darkness. He tried to invoke them, calling on the spirits of the deep places. But Eli laughed, and the sound was enough to shatter the last of Murk's courage. "You're not the first," Eli whispered, bending close, "and you won't be the last." All around them, Murk saw other monsters, old, powerful beings, caged and broken, their eyes hollow, their bodies twisted into cruel parodies of their former selves. He realized then that Eli had been waiting. Not for a victim, but for a servant, for a pet, for fuel. Bound by invisible chains, Murk was forced to kneel before the boy thing. His body no longer his own, his will shattered like brittle glass. And above, in the quiet house, the real Eli continued to move among the living, innocent and smiling. No one knew the horror that lurked just beneath his feet. At school, teachers remarked how polite he was, how still he sat, how wide his smile always seemed, but sometimes, when no one was looking, his eyes would flash a deep, ancient black. And, if you listened closely, you could hear faint whispers coming from under his breath. The voices of things that should never have been tamed. Each night, Eli would lure new monsters to his room. Some came easily, sensing an easy meal. Others, older and wiser, tried to resist, but none succeeded. They all ended up in the room beneath reality, torn apart and repurposed, feeding the growing hunger inside the small boy with the too-wide grin. Murk's existence became a cycle of pain and obedience. He would scout other houses, whispering and stirring fear to lure his kind toward Eli's trap. And in return, Eli would allow him to keep a fraction of himself intact, just enough to remember the horror of what he had become. The bed, once a sanctuary of darkness for Murk, was now a glowing trap, a siren's call for every monster foolish enough to think themselves invincible. At night, when the house was silent, you could hear Murk sobbing under the bed, begging for forgiveness, for release. But Eli never granted it. He would instead tap, gently on the bed frame, sending waves of nausea and terror through Murk's broken body. "You're doing good," Eli would whisper. "Soon, you'll bring me more." And so Murk lived, not as a terror, but as a terrified slave, a whisperer of doom to his own kind. The irony was a bitter poison in his veins. Every time a new monster crept into Eli's room, drawn by the smell of easy fear, Murk felt a twisted mix of relief and shame. Relief that for a brief moment, Eli's attention would turn elsewhere. Shame that he had delivered another soul to the boy's insatiable hunger. The walls under the bed grew thick with the echoes of their screams. Eli would hum as he worked, peeling their minds apart, stuffing pieces of them into jars and adding them to his growing collection. And Murk would watch, powerless, hollow, praying for the one thing monsters were never meant to desire.